Welcome to everyone. And if someone could just confirm that you can actually hear me. Good. Thank you very much. All right. Now, this is not the first time, but I'm trying to multitask. So just bear with me for a moment. Just have some other things I'm having to do at the same time. No, I can't see you. This is the format with these webinars. You are actually free to do whatever you like. I would have no idea what you are up to. Not like with Zoom, where people can switch on their cameras and then I can see them. So kindly bear with me just for a second here. Good, yes, please meditate. Okay. Something I wanted to do today, actually, before we begin anything else, because right now what we presently are looking at is essentially what we call deconstruction. And we're talking about emptiness, right? And so you hear all these arguments. You might wonder, do I really need to know this? And this is actually, this is where we're not actually learning anything here. You do not need to learn anything here. Please remember that. Repeat after me. I do not have to learn anything here. What we are doing, however, is we are challenging our assumptions about our perceptions. That's what we're doing. So you don't think, there's no such a thing as, you can say, I know emptiness. There's no state of emptiness. But what there is presently an extraordinary degree of confusion in which we attribute solidity to what, in fact, cannot have solidity. We're being told, oh yeah, phenomena are empty. Well, it's not as if, as good Buddhists, you're supposed to say, okay, the Guru says everything is emptiness, then everything must be emptiness. No, and the Guru doesn't want that. The Buddha doesn't want that. What the Buddha wants us to do is to look. And that's what we're doing. We're looking at reality. And so there's nothing that doesn't belong to that. Somebody the other day came and said, well, how about other dimensions? Well, the same thing applies to any given phenomena that is an object of our perception. Any given phenomena that is situated in a way that it becomes an object of our reference and knowledge. That goes for everything. There's nothing, we say, that escapes what we call absolute analysis. And that is where we go in and we say, is there what I think there is? And that's very real for us. It's not like we're philosophers, but we do actually think that we have a mother. We do think we have children. We do believe in taxes. And we should relate to our mother. We should be kind to our mother. We should be nice to our children. We should pay taxes. But the thing is that the way that we solidify these phenomena is not how they actually exist. Taxes, our children, our parents, the entire world, they do not exist the way we think they do. And This is not a philosophical issue because this is what drives our suffering. We suffer because we have, on the basis of what we perceive, we have likes and dislikes. We actually have this situation in which we continually encounter things in which we react in three different ways. We solidify. Okay. Let's see. How's the sound now? Is it okay? At least something is being, it's a bit echoing. Okay. This is actually a good example, isn't it? We would like to have non-echoing sound, and what we're getting is echoing sound, right? That echoing is undesirable. If we were getting sound that doesn't echo, then that's desirable. So right now, it's happening right now, in the very moment right now. There's possibly not much I can do about it. Let me try to fix it. But try and think about this. Everything we perceive, we think about in terms of that we like something, we don't like something. That has nothing to do with the object itself. Let's say I have this mouse. This mouse might work or not work. And on the basis of whether it works or not, I will like or dislike it. It works, I'm happy with it. It doesn't work, I'm not happy with it. That has nothing to do with the mouse itself. Try and notice that our relationship with the entire phenomenal world is about us liking and not liking. This is such an important point. This is why we're doing what we're doing here. Because on the basis of the reality there is, we actually are continually evolved in not facing reality, not accepting reality, but about liking and disliking what's happening. Somebody says something to us, we might not like it, but it's the reality that they're saying something to us. We might have somebody insults us and somebody saying standing next to us, and they hear the same words, but because they're not being insulted, they actually might say, just chill out, Jakob. You know, this is, you know, the guy that's delusional or whatever. Just chill out. Meanwhile, I'm deeply offended, right? That has nothing to do with the words. So why we're doing all this deconstruction is to actually look that in the object itself, there is not the reality that is likable or dislikable, that doesn't exist in the object, and even the object itself that appears solid doesn't actually possess that inherent existence, that inherent reality. And whether or not we say that phenomena, that's very sweet. Somebody says, learning to love the echo. I don't know what it did. But I think when I have to give up on one thing that I was trying to do here.
Unless the sound might be from the speaker and then feeding back in.
Let's see here. I have to give up on the one. Just a sec. I'm trying to multitask here. But that should have nothing to do with the. Okay. Meanwhile, out here, why would it not be? Let me just try. It might be something to do with the microphone. So the audio. No, the audio is the same as usual. No. I think we might have solved it here. I think probably the audio is better now. Very good. You're all being really good. People are saying things like, as long as I can hear and understand you, all is good. Learning to love the echo. Good for us to work with this. It's not a major issue. You see, that's kind of it. This is what we're doing. Of course, we could all say, well, let's just try to have equanimity in the face of difficulties. That's of course very good. That's definitely admirable. But what we do actually, in what the Buddha is trying to show us, is actually there is, if we analyze phenomena, like I'll look at the computer here and I construct it in a particular way. But if I go in and look at this, it is essentially a conglomeration of just particles. Why do I project solidity onto this phenomenon? And that's actually where we've had some interesting discussion also with Peter, our scientist in residence, who would point out how in neuroscience we actually generate images that in the brain. Sorry, neuroscience would say we generate images in our brain. And of course there the implication is we do that as a, you could say, a default position of just the, you could say, the project of surviving. So that's a little bit difference there, but in fact we're saying the same thing, that actually we are just looking at a field, an infinite field of phenomena, and we are constructing what we call qualia, particular characteristics about the perceived object. Is that making sense, Peter? So far, so good? Okay, well, all right. We're getting the blue stamp of approval from authoritative sources. But so this is where there's a construction taking place that, from the Buddhist point of view, we would say that is due to the information that's stored on the groundhouse consciousness, that on the one hand is caught up with the sense of self, and on the basis of the sense of self, there's a whole ground. You could say we call it the storehouse consciousness, the alaya, the ground in which the sense of self abides, and that is something that we sit with. We're not talking about some mysterious, you know, the Akashic records or something mysterious, transcendent. It is the thing that you're hearing with right now. It's the thing that we carry with us. It's the most, you could say, verifiable reality that we have. And that is where there's a space in which is constructed this, again, non-existent phenomenon that we call self. And you're not supposed to say, okay, as good Buddhists, I think there is no self, or I shouldn't be selfish. That's even worse. That's the moralism. That's like, I should be different from how I am. Right now, we are self-centered. We do have ego. What we're trying to do here is actually show that there is no ego. So it's not about the Buddha saying, thou should be a good boy and girl. It's just saying that there's nothing there. We're hallucinating. And that's where this investigation that we're undertaking here is not intended to show something deep and mystical and far out. It's simply just in the best possible way, according to how language can best do it. And the Khenpo is doing its very best to really just say, have a look at reality and see actually the phenomenon, the reality of self, the reality or the perception of self, the perception of the phenomenal world. If we investigate, we cannot find anything that corresponds to the way that we project onto it and the solidity that we project onto it. So that's all we're doing. The beauty of this is it's not replacing it by some new metaphysical proposition about something or other. It's not. It really just wants us to look, and that's where the Buddha, and what the Buddha is telling us, is an open dimension that is free from these projections. When we sit down and meditate, we're not supposed to go into a zone. We're not supposed to close out perceptions. We're not supposed to go into ourselves. We are opening our eyes and looking at reality. We're listening to reality. We're touching and tasting reality, and we're seeing, the solidity that I project is not grounded in anything. Isn't it interesting that I then, on the basis of that, I generate narratives of acceptance, rejection, attraction, aversion, and so on. And again, this is not something that was done sort of in order for people to go sort of mental or weird or go into some sort of special dimension of enlightenment that's sort of otherworldly. It's about us actually becoming free. And if you meet a sage, what characterizes a sage is somebody that's actually a very relaxed person. There's a burden that was lifted. There's a freedom from this sort of burden that we've carried. So all the Buddha wants, and all the Dalai Lama wants, and all what the Khenpo and whatever, all the various schools that you have, Svatantrika or Sotrantika, Bebashika, Yogacarya, all what they're just going through various ways in which this can be approached. So at the end of the day, this is really just about us beginning to be interested in our world. This is about us hopefully being provoked by what is being said here and saying, oh yeah, and taking it with us. It's not like there's something that has to be sort of memorized or learned. There's a curiosity, there's an inquisitiveness that lies at the basis of this, and which we're then encouraged to sort of cotton onto. And so, sometimes you hear persons that have been to Madhyamaka teaching and they say, oh, it was really wonderful, but man, that was far out, I couldn't understand anything or whatever. And all what we're really doing with the Madhyamaka teaching is just engendering an interest in our world, but basically saying, this hallucination that you're having, try and look if it's really there. That's all. That's all that's being said. But we are addressing this questioning, this critical, you could say, project to everything that we can think of in terms of time and space. So space, of course, is understood in terms of all the objects, all the phenomena that we perceive, and all of that is taking place within a flow that plays out in terms of sequence, moment after moment after moment. And certainly within Western thought, the relativity of this is yes, that's known, but it's really just known as information. What we are talking about in the Buddhist teaching is we need that information is just the beginning. That's where this actually needs to impact us. We need to be impacted by this information. We can't just sort of have it there and then we can think about it, or talk about it, or whatever. We need to be impacted by it. And that's where the practice of meditation is actually where we begin to, we've seen the hopes that we're subject to, and meditation is where we actually begin to let go of this delusional practice that we perpetuate. In meditation, again, Vipassana meditation, we're not constructing anything. We're not going into some particular, it's sometimes a bit misleading when we talk about meditating on the nature of mind, meditating on Rigpa, or meditating on this, that, or the other. And we might think, oh, there's somewhere I'm supposed to be. All we're saying is to allow that natural quality of openness to just take hold of us. But it's openness, it's not a thing. So in that sense, the analysis that we're undertaking here is really just intended for us to begin to look at our reality and see that the solidity is not there, both in terms of time and space. And as such, then meditation is really just a place where we can comfortably just relinquish the ordinary way in which the mind is continually hooking on to narratives, storylines, thoughts, basically. So before we begin meditation, there has to first be this thing that we call a view. And that is when we speak about Vipassana, we have two approaches to this. One is this initial analysis, and that's what we call analytical meditation. And the second is settling. That's where we then just relax. We've kind of established that the boogeyman that we're projecting, the snake and so on, that it's actually our own projection, and it only exists as long as we, in our distracted state, keep on thinking. So meditation is not about us stopping thoughts, but it's about us not gullibly tagging along distractedly with what arises in the mind. So this is hopefully something that is interesting to you. And I would say we probably benefit a lot. I mean, the thing is, I can't sit here as a representative for the Buddha, but what we can each and everyone do is that guy that we're being referred to here, this Khenpo, he seems to have a point that he wants to make, and how could I actually connect with what he's saying and kind of try to make sense of what he's saying. So, I mean, I'm just sitting here as a conduit, and I'm not able to, you could say, correctly represent you could say, the way that you might perceive things, or the way even that the Khenpo or the Buddha are trying to present things. I can't do that. But what I can do is expose us to this and enable us to actually connect with this teaching. And then I think all of us, you all at this point, I hope, have the book, and come back to the book and look at it and think about these ideas. And I realize these are radical ideas, and that's also why the next study after this one will be along the same lines, really. But all the time, it's really just about us looking at reality and looking at our experience. So it should be something personal in which we are then impacted. So let's look at the actual text. So we're presently looking at what are we? Are we at the Svatantrika or I think we're at the Svatantrika, yeah. So we're looking at the Madhyamika way of looking at reality. And there, again, they say anything that we conceive of is necessarily delusion. Initially, you could say with what we call this, here it's referred to as the Shravakas, the Shravaka level. It's obvious that we are projecting onto a reality, but we're still saying there's some particles out there. We're still thinking in terms of there's an actual consciousness. That's where there's still what is called some substantial reference. In the Madhyamika, they would say that there is no reference whatsoever. I think we could take that. There is, if you're a card-carrying, believing Buddhist, you might say, okay, this is interesting because I have heard from the sages that the prasangika, or the Madhyamika view is the most accurate. This we have from the sages. But of course, we should also say, but isn't it interesting, regardless of whether I'm just projecting solidity onto a phenomena and there's a ground for it, or I'm projecting solidity onto something for which there's absolutely no ground. Regardless, this is radical. So we're looking at the various, you could say, degrees in which this solidification takes place. But either way, it still comes back to our practice of meditation, in which when we sit, we're actually beginning to connect with the reality in which we're not perpetuating. We don't have to sit down and say, what is reality? Because reality is not a thing. But what we are doing is allowing a space in which we are not doing what we normally do, which is thinking about things, objectifying things, holding on to memories, holding on to worries about the future or dreams about the future or this, that, and actually instead just be properly connected to being present. So meditation as such is not constructing anything. It is the freedom from construction. It's the most naked, you could say, way of engaging what is. So the beauty of what the Buddha is that we could do this without philosophy, without trying to set up buffers or ideas or anything. Actually, the Buddha's discovery was that reality in and of itself is perfect, and it contains everything that we like. It contains love. It contains warmth. It contains sense of humor, if you like. It contains color, texture, beauty, flourishing in every aspect. And in our ordinary life, everything we like about our life is actually where that nature somehow, breaks through. Everything we don't like in ourselves and in others is where we shut down and obscure on the basis of our rigidity. So that's what we presently here, humbly acknowledging that does take place. And that's where we're intending to get to the bottom of this. So I say this because for a couple of decades I've been in this business, and it's very often that Either people sort of have a glazed look and kind of space out, or or they just think, oh, I'm better learn something, or else they'll say, oh gosh, I can't understand this. I can't understand. There's not really anything to understand, but there's willingness to engage in a critical look at our reality. That's all. And sort of get a little bit where the Buddha is coming from. But the Buddha is not about teaching us something, but the Buddha is very keen on us unlearning, coming back to an innocent place of where confusion hadn't originated. So now with regards to then Nagarjuna, a household name, it says Nagarjuna applied the same argument to mental phenomena. Let's just see what that argument was. Oh, the single and multiple. Okay, yeah. So we've already looked in terms of the hand, right? We said this hand, well, we can't say there's just one thing. It's many different things, fingers, sinews, tissues, what have you. We also can't say there's many different things. It's not as if there's a hand with many different hands. So it's not, it doesn't exist in terms of a single thing or in terms of multiple things. For this to be a single thing, it would be unbreakable. For it to be multiple, made up of multiple particles, there should have to be some entities that constructed that multiplicity, and even that we cannot find. So here it says, Nagarjuna applied the same argument to mental phenomena. Mental phenomena are experienced by the mind. Is a moment of experience single or multiple? If it is neither, it cannot truly exist. Right? So there's the appearance, right? But for something to be truly there, it would have to be either a solid thing or made up of many different things. That's the argument here. Please take this with you. This is not about us sort of right away clicking in, but it's something that we then take with us, and hopefully it haunts us a bit. So this is what we take with us, and this we can apply to everything. You're saying Jakob, then is that Jakob a single person? Well, it seems that we're sort of relating to Jakob as a single person. But then again, can you really find the true unchanging Jakob? Well, I can tell you people, there isn't, in case you were wondering. And also, it's not as if there's many different Jakobs either. Anyway, this kind of, you could say, analysis we should carry with us. So he said, if it were single, now we're talking about time, right? So we have moments of experiencing time. We are experiencing moments of time right now, okay? Now, so a moment of time, a moment of experience. If it were single, it would not be able to have any duration. So a single moment would actually mean that there's no duration, because duration means that there's a beginning, middle, and an end, right? Khenpo says, duration means there is a beginning, middle, and end. If you say there is a beginning, middle, and end, then the moment is 3 moments. And so the idea of a single moment has completely disappeared. The original moment has disappeared. So there is actually no more a moment. Every single moment, every single phenomenon is like that. So we would say there's a beginning, middle, and end to a moment. Otherwise, if there wasn't that, then we wouldn't talk about duration. There wouldn't be any notion of time. So we're basically saying time is a delusion. So there's not, you could say, aha, this is what time is. It's basically to understand that the entire idea of time, as well as any given phenomenon in space, is a non-existent. It's something that we construct. So following that logic, therefore he says it cannot be either single or multiple. However minutely you analyze, you never find a smallest possible truly existent moment of experience of which all other existent experience could be made up. This is not something we understand. This is something we take with us. So kindly refer to the book, like I always say, you must have the book out. This is what we're doing here. It's hopeless. But that's where we then come back to these lines here. And again, it haunts us. However minutely you analyze, you never find the smallest possible truly existent moment of experience, of which all other existent experience could be made up. Consciousness or experience is empty of self-nature because ultimately there is no truly existent moment of consciousness or experience. Again, this is not about us all of a sudden going, wow. You know, this is more about us beginning to see how there's an unnecessary component that in which we actually remove ourselves from reality, that filters our reality. So we're interested in coming much closer to a fresh, unmediated experience. And that's where the notion of time and space actually constitutes a cognitive obscuration, a cognitive dysfunction in which we're just not seeing properly. So in that way, this deconstruction is really just intended to take down the idea of self-nature or something that's truly existent. And this applies both to consciousness or any aspect of experience, perceptions of self, perceptions of other. Now, here we're talking about a particular course. Of course, this, like any science, would have various ways of, you could say, getting at it. So when you see that there's different schools of, you know, what we call philosophy, I suppose, in the Buddhist teaching, it's only normal because there's different individuals who arrive at the same, you could say, insight, but emphasizing different ways. People will use different language according to the culture, but they'll also identify interesting aspects with regards to this. And so Svatantrikas, they're the ones who presently, they emphasize more, you could say, the language of relative and absolute truth, or rather the language that speaks about the two truths. You could say they're a bit more explicit in terms of the way that they establish emptiness. You have the famous Prasagikas, and all they say is just like, you know, they actually don't say anything. They're the ones who don't say anything, and they just prove you wrong. Anytime that anybody sort of makes a little squeak about, yeah, well, this, they're like really interested. They're like, oh, really? You think that? Well, then it would absurdly follow, you know, if there's somebody who created everything, they're like, oh, really? So there's someone who created everything, and they're part of all creations. Oh, that's really interesting. So that they would say, so actually you don't mind if you eat feces or if you eat food. And they would go, what? Because they would say, well, you're saying that cause and effect are the same. The creator and something that is created, that which originates is the seed, and that which is the result, the cause and the effect, same. Oh, well, in that case, you know, the cause of your feces, your shit, is the food. So that means you're saying there's no difference between cause and effect. Well, then, and there's kind of like that. Of course, this sounds a bit gross. And they might actually phrase it in a more lighthearted way, but also in philosophical discussion, there's a little bit, so it gets a little bit robust. And that's why they would say, what you're saying, it just doesn't hold. And then they would say, well, what do you think? And they actually say, well, you know, the nature of reality is not such that it's something that we can understand in that through philosophy. We can't understand it through words and language, logic, and so on. So the Prasangikas, they don't bother with putting up language and philosophy. The Svatantrikas, they understand what the Prasagikas are on about, but they do make a point about talking to people. You would say, meeting people more on their sort of own particular logic. Yeah. So here, so the Khenpo says Svatantrikas like to use two main types of argument. One is the argument used above, i.e. neither single nor multiple, and the other is merely dependent arising, praticca samutpada. So this is also, praticca samutpada is quite familiar, and that's essentially where we say everything exists as due to causes and conditions. Everything is conditioned. And what we actually then need to identify is, it stands in opposition to us thinking that things actually exist unconditionally. And maybe intellectually we don't think so, but try and see how we emotionally attribute, you say, unconditional reality. You know, next time we're sitting being upset about the political situation or politicians, and just in our everyday life, you know, our spouse, our children, our colleagues, the neighbor, whatever. We need to see how we attribute solid reality to them. I mean, you maybe don't have that problem, in which case that's really wonderful, but that's yours truly has it very regularly. And so that's where the insight that there is in fact just a web of ever-shifting causes and conditions on the basis of us attributing, you could say, solidity to phenomena, and also from their own side. Everything is continually shifting. Seed becomes sprout, becomes plant, becomes fruit, becomes, and then again becomes part of the earth, and so on. So the Khenpo says, what is dependently arising, by definition, has no self-nature. Therefore, to show all phenomena are dependently arising is to show they have no self-nature. So the moment we say pratitya samutpada, we're also saying the famous shunyata. So here, nota bene. Some Svatantrikas take out appearing phenomena to be different in substance to the mind, and some do not. But all agree that both outer perceived objects and inner perceiving consciousness are empty of self-nature. None of them accept, as the Chittamatras do, that the dependently arising phenomena have a kind of true existence, meaning that the mind that constructs this has some reality. That's the Chittamatran position. Here you have some that in the Svatantrika tradition would say that everything is the same as the mind, and some would say that there is not even such a mind. So that's where you could say there's two differences, but all what they're really saying, they all come back to this common point, that there is no inherent nature. Absence of inherent nature is the buzzword here. That's what we are intending to establish. Okay. Okay. So most newborn animals, including humans, are born with such a reaction to a cliff that suggests some important patterns are built in. Well, yes, that's what. Oh, there's more. Is projecting solidity onto phenomena the function of mind, though? Yes, and that is where we can talk about mind as being fundamentally deluded, and this is what persists moment after moment, lifetime after lifetime. So we're all sentient beings are innocent in the way that they then solidify things. That's also why we would have some that vote one way and others vote another way. And everybody would have a different view, because we're all perceiving phenomena, you could say, in a flawed way. But that is the very nature of this relative, you could say, ordinary mind, is that it projects solidity. And that is, you could say, it's a function of it, it's an inherent quality of that mind. And then someone says, science also says that the patterns the human minds create from the input are related to the survival needs of Homo sapiens. Yes, this is also the argument that was made here some time ago. And that therefore produces different sets of patterns for the same reason. It helps ants to survive. Yes, that is essentially where we talk about. This is common for all of samsara, that there is the drive to essentially secure self. And that is where everybody operates with in varying degrees. And where we would the Buddhists and natural sciences would differ is that we would say the Buddhists would say that further beyond the survival instinct is that basic assumption of self that is delusional. So in a sense, everybody's innocent, but it's within that pattern of delusion then that we have a very well functioning, and that's Sansa Rinpoche, he would always make this point. The thing about relative truth, it's so convincing. It appears to be so, because they're elegantly constructed. So then here it says, when an ant approaches an ant-lion trap, it produces a pattern in its mind that is associated with flight response. If you or I even notices an ant-lion trap, we don't need to produce a pattern associated with our flight response. Absolutely, yes. Most newborn animals, including the humans, are born with such a reaction to a cliff that suggests some important patterns are built in. Yes, of course, yes. How would you know if you did understand or perceive emptiness? Can you know this? I feel like there is a huge leap of faith involved. Attachment, yes. Interdependence, yes. But emptiness, how is it different from a belief in God, for instance? Okay. So good we're having this discussion, because you don't want to spend many years practicing the Buddhist path and then at the end sort of end up watching YouTube videos and trying to figure out the whole thing, via, I don't know. You would want from the very start to really hear what's being said and to really try to understand what's said, and then make that the basis of your meditation, and then travel the journey. But don't, for decade after decade, still be sort of scratching your head and reading new books and looking here, looking there. You want to actually arrive at a clarity. And that's where the clarity could never be understood in terms of just information. It has to be felt. And what you're saying here, how could you know if you understand or perceive emptiness? The freedom that comes from just arriving at a sense of ground in which you trust your very basic freedom from any conceptual constructs, and noticing how this confusion builds up and we get stuck in the spin of our own projections. So essentially, how would you know? Relief. And also it helps to talk with somebody who has genuine experience. And that's where, again, yes, of course, I was saying, there's a lot in this guild, in this field in which people have apprentices. There's a lot of advice that's given. There's a lot of knowledge that's there, and that's where we need to get over the initial hurdle so that we can actually begin to understand what they're saying. And then so much of the teachings that we have actually all of a sudden make an incredible sense in terms of us aligning it with our experience. So there's no leap of faith. In fact, we would say it's so important to be skeptical. It's so important to doubt, because when you doubt, actually, if you don't doubt, it's just like, well, whatever, Yeah, I sort of like to hang around. I like temples. They're nice to be around, and you sit there and there's a nice feeling. Vibes are good, that sort of thing. And that's where you have that sort of simple thing. But if you really think, gosh, this is radical, and I really want to get to the bottom of it, then that doubt, that lingering, nagging doubt that wants to understand, it stays with us, and we investigate, and we investigate, and we investigate. And so that's where then, on the basis of investigation, then we sort of go, okay, yes, now I'm beginning to get it. No. It's again coming back to the snake in the rope. I'm sorry to always be coming back to the snake in the rope, because it's about the Vipassana has founded us looking at the snake and seeing it go away. You could very well practice meditation, and it is like I said last time. It's a bit like the snake is there, but I don't care. There's a snake sitting right next to me, but I'm just going to be serene, and I'm going to be calm, and then maybe the snake will just go away, or I'll make friends with the snake, or whatever. And of course, the Buddha is very sympathetic to that. And the Buddha says, well, if you want to practice mindfulness and you'll just have peace of mind and so on, but if you still believe in the snake, that's very much what you would say basic to the modern mindfulness movement, is that there's not really a notion that the whole problem of self is a hoax to begin with. There's just like, how are we going to handle our life? Oh yeah, mindfulness. Well, that's really helpful, And so that's where essentially we're just meditating next to the snake. I'm just thinking, I'm going to make friends with the snake. I don't mind if there's snake, And that's what shamatha, mindfulness, can do. But with Vipassana, we're interested in actually looking and seeing that there is, in fact, no snake there. So that's where what is required is not a huge leap of faith, but actually an enormous amount of critical thinking. But it's also critical thinking about the nature of critique itself. So it's not just that we're going to be stuck with just an endless loop of critical thinking, which is what skepticism or even cynicism becomes. So that's where this nature that we're talking about here, it's very different from the idea of a God. It's very different from the idea of some cosmic substance. It's the freedom from the mind that in its insecurity is trying to latch on to something. It's very big. The Buddha is coming from a place of greatness, not of having found, oh yeah, this works. You know, if you take this pill, it's going to work, you know. One thing I've been wondering for a bit is, are interdependence and dependent arising the same thing or different? I've noticed it written differently depending on who's written it. Yeah, absolutely. It's translated so many different ways. Praticca Samutpada, which is the Sanskrit, and Tenjing Gelwa Jongla is Tibetan. That's it, and it's translated in many different ways. And it really just means that phenomena arise as they exist on the basis of causes and conditions, on the basis of essentially dependency. That means they don't have reality. There's a kind of nice, sweet, but what is that sometimes sneaks into this discourse, and I don't know how, but maybe, yeah, and I wouldn't want to speculate about it, but it has snuck into the discourse and has nothing to do with the Buddhist teaching. This idea that we're all linked together. Interdependence means that the cereal that you're eating, it comes from the grain that was grown by the farmer who lives far away. And so through eating the cereal, we're connected with the farmer. And of course, that's true. That's very nice. But it has nothing to do with what we're talking about when we talk about Praticca Samutpada, which is really just the way in which we understand that there is no snake. That's, you know, it's not like we're related to the snake, or we can have a nice positive outlook on snakes, or we love snakes, so we can be part of a sort of society of snake lovers or whatever. It's completely different. It's really about seeing through a hoax. So wisdom isn't mind, or it is mind, just another function of mind. Well, you could say in the core of this cognitive quality that presently is, you could say, caught up in delusion, there is something that's not deluded. So that's Buddha nature. And that's what we call, sometimes we call it jhana, and sometimes we call it wisdom, sometimes we call it nature of mind. But the point about this is it's never something that can be grasped. That's the thing. Not something we can go into, hold on to. It's the absence of that. And this is subtle. And this is why you could say the Buddhist teaching over 2,500 years has always come back to the same thing. You know? It's always come back to this immense freedom. But so much has been said, so much has been taught. People have put so much time and effort into it, successfully, individually arriving at this. And it's not just something that, you know, sort of just get like that. So it's incredibly worthwhile, but it also is something we should understand. It is something that's subtle. So we approach the subject matter with some humility, and we can look at the teachers. We can say, yes, I'd like to have what they're having. That looks like it's working beautifully. And they are very much interested, not in us objectifying and idolizing them, but in fact, yes, having what they had and arriving at the same freedom. But it will never consist of, you could say, subscribing to a philosophical position. That's what Nagarjuna, that's what the Madhyamaka is all about. This freedom that we're talking about here is about relinquishing any such reference point. So I suppose being a sage would be I suppose that being near sage could confirm emptiness. Yes, it would definitely give us trust in the subject matter. It would give us trust, because it wouldn't be somebody who was just weird. It would be somebody who would display qualities that we could relate to. That's why the Dalai Lama, wherever he goes, everybody likes him. And you know, it's not because they're going to get a lot of great trade agreements. It's not as if everybody's putting their trade agreements with China in the balance. They're risking the wrath of the great tiger the moment that they sneak in and see the Dalai Lama in the VIP lounge in transit in airports. But they want to see him. Sometimes they'll leak that out, so it might sort of, you know, please some of the liberal voters. But there is overall, universally, this quality about the Dalai Lama that is just likable beyond any kind of cultural, you could say, conventions of any kind. So yes, a sage does confirm the value of what we're doing here. And of course, also, the more you get involved in the Buddhist teaching, you find it's not just that there's the Dalai Lama, there's actually many men and women, famous, not famous, who actually really reflect this, you could say, the value of this. Maybe delusion is built into the human psyche, because while it causes suffering at certain times, the imputations on which it is built may also have benefit of shortcutting a whole lot of analysis as we drive toward a cliff. The snake in the rope may be a very useful delusion when the rope is really a snake. Yes, but the example here is given for the purpose of identifying that there's a delusion that does not make us happy. So, and of course, Buddha nature pervades all of life. And so sometimes it's less obscured. And then we have, of course, what we call human brilliance, human goodness, kindness, selflessness, and what have you. All of that is always there. What we're just talking about here is removing what obscures it. So if we can identify goodness, and we have it, and we meet it everywhere in our life, then of course that's you could say, that's worth cultivating. And you'll see, if you meditate, if you take the medicine here, the Dalai Lama encouraging tolerance, kindness, patience, well, lo and behold, it actually does seem to make even more sense. We can see it works, you know. We can verify this. If we practice meditation in which you could say, undermine or short circuit the ordinary unconscious distracted pattern of perpetuating our thinking, well, it does make a difference. We become fresher, more present individuals. So, you know, and you can travel to Asia and you can come across entire populaces where compassion is practiced. Very often people say, oh, that populace there, or this group here, they're actually really nice people, you know. Well, that's for a reason. That's because there is a cultural practice that actually celebrates and validates this. So there's a valid science happening here. Rinpoche says that describing emptiness is like trying to describe the taste of salt to someone who has never tasted. Exactly. So that's why we're not gonna give the answer. There's no such a thing as the mantra. There's no such a thing as emptiness is like this. The whole point is to divest ourselves of that which prevents us from actually going out and tasting. There's salt around, so you know the Buddhists are saying, please taste the salt. You know, don't think about the salt, just taste it. And that's the same what we're doing with the practice of meditation. You know, that's of course for the modern person and people in general at all times. They've always been so habituated towards distraction that sitting and not being distracted is like, I don't know if I want to do that. So that's where the Buddha has to do a little bit of salesmanship, saying, well, you know, this is what actually would enable you to be more, you could say, aligned with reality and less suffering. Are our innate tendencies explained by karma? Yeah, that's what it is. That is how this, you could say, pattern of ignorance, it plays out. Yeah, on the basis of the innate tendencies, we have particular, you could say, karmic projections. I have heard that dependent arising is relative truth and no self-nature is ultimate truth. Yes, very good. Why dependent arising is being regarded as relative truth since it equals no self-nature? Well, because both relative and absolute truth are really the same thing. So when I'm looking at this, I will say teacup, right? Now the absolute truth about this is that it is in and of itself, doesn't possess any inherent existence. It's just a set of causes and conditions. And that's why I would say, well, due to causes and conditions dependent arising, there is a dependent arising of a teacup. But as a sentient being, I fail to see the empty nature of this. That's why I have attachment and aversion to what I perceive. The Buddhas, however, they see that there is no inherent nature in this, and they don't as such have the same, you'd say, difficulty with phenomena. And that's where in this teacup, we have both the dependent arising and the emptiness at the same time. Relative truth and absolute truth are inherent in the teacup at the same time. The difference between sentient beings and Buddhas are that the sentient beings, they're just stuck on the surface. and they don't see absolute truth. So they're just caught by the perception that comes about due to dependent arising, set of causes and conditions. And that's why they solidify this mistakenly. So we understand relative truth, all our different, you could say, perceptions and experiences of reality. We understand that as dependent arising. Yet if we investigate, the truth of anything that is a dependent arising is that it is innately, in and of itself, by nature, by being a dependent arising, something that is empty. And that's the ultimate truth. Class is a bit trippy tonight. Snakes and teacups. Why can't it be more simple, like cereal and lovely farmers? Oh, I agree. That's true. Well, look, we won't talk more about all these snakes, and we'll leave it at this and just think. I have tried to maybe understand a little bit about what these Buddhists are on about, and grateful to a very kind Khenpo who really in his heart really just wants to share something that's very valuable. So there's a very lovely Khenpo here who wants to share something with us. You know, we're having a nightmare, and the Khenpo really wants to say, you know what, you're lying in your bed, you have the covers, the pillows, mommy and daddy are here, it's all good. Please don't have a nightmare, it's okay, it's all right. And that's what the Khenpo just wants us to understand, really. So, and us trying to understand this constitutes something very valuable, very, say, meaningful. Okay. By this merit, may all attain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, in the ocean of samsara, may all beings be free. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish, ever more and more. Okay. 2-minute break. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so a little bit about meditation. So meditation is, for those of you who are online, I'd like you to just look at that landscape here, which is a beautiful mountain meadows with lots of mountain sort of naturally growing flowers. And then there in the distance we have a mountain surrounded by clouds. And this is actually a very good metaphor for what we're doing with meditation. Because in fact, what we are really doing with what the Buddha wants us to do is actually to settle into the ground. You know, like Tongsa Khenpo Tsultrim is often making the point that the beauty of the Buddha's gesture, you know, it's not like the Buddha is somebody who like, you know, you remember Rodin, the thinker, you know, the sort of guy who sits there, you know, with hunched over, frontal lobes piled up, you know, and that's the thinker. And that, of course, is praiseworthy. He might actually sort of, through his thinking, arrive at something that's very worthwhile. So we shouldn't necessarily think it's absolutely, you know, futile in any way. But what we have with the Buddha is someone who actually sits, and you could say the mere gesture of the Buddha is this quality of somebody who's completely, fully, nakedly present within reality, and touching the ground. That touching the ground in and of itself is such an incredibly beautiful gesture. And so what we're doing with the practice of meditation is like this landscape that you're seeing here. I'm trying to see if I can share it with the others in the room. I don't know if you can see there's a bit of a beautiful mountain landscape happening. Yeah? I'm trying to sell meditation sort of through the sort of through the gimmick of this mountain valley. So that's where the gesture of the Buddha touching the ground is us connecting. And the thing is, this ground is good. So I was mentioning to somebody I was going to do a retreat, and this being a Vajrayana person, they said, "Oh, what are you going to meditate on?" And I said, "Well, I'm afraid there won't be any entertainment. It will just be sitting." And this person said, "Well, that's boring, you know." Yes, from the point of view of the modern person who would like to be entertained, and also in the case of many Vajrayana addicts for whom meditation is this sort of entertainment, you know, you sit, visualize this, you spin this mantra, you have this, that, and all sorts of things going on. You actually never touch the ground. You're always stuck with paintings of mountains or visualizing mountain meadows. What we'd want to do from the start is that all these methods that we have in the teaching, they're not about us becoming increasingly good at visualizing mountain meadows. It's of us actually settling into the mountain meadow of our reality, being present within the reality. And again, I'm not talking about something that's impossible, because we do have persons who have done this. Of course, yes, in our culture, there's a little bit far between your sort of your local neighborhood sage and so forth. But at the same time, I think everybody, almost oddly, against all odds really, actually can visualize sage and almost even expects saintlyhood from their fellow humans. I mean, when we're upset with people in various ways, it's as if they didn't live up to our expectations. Well, how did we ever have expectations to begin with? Where did that come from? Why would we expect people to be saintly? How often do we come across saintlyhood, etc., right? So there is innately a capacity to appreciate this, you could say, ground. And so what we would want to bring to the Buddha's path is essentially that this is, with all its methods, it's only about us connecting to the ground. So if it's visualization, visualization is really just intended for us to begin to have some sense of this reality. It's understanding, and you could say visualizing a purity that we presently might not get, but which we can actually intuit. And so from the very start, what we want to do is really enable a trust in the goodness of our own being. And also with that, what interestingly happens is we also begin to come across a perception of the goodness in others. We can try and see that when we're sort of paranoid and all of that, we begin to see, weird people around us. When we are relaxed and trusting and grounded, we begin to see goodness in the people around us. And as such, the project here is very much about us allowing ourselves, not with anything artificial, but rather just discovering a natural goodness that's innate to ourselves and also innate to the world at large. And that is where the practice of meditation, it couldn't be anything more beautiful, it couldn't be anything more organic, it couldn't be anything more real, in the sense that what we're doing with the practice of meditation is actually what's implicit in the word religion, despite the way it sort of occupies the language nowadays, is to connect, religare. It is to connect. And that's what we do with implicitly also in all religions, some way or another, where we can connect with goodness. Of course, when it's filtered through, you could say, the strange behavior of human beings, sometimes it doesn't quite appear like that, and language doesn't necessarily do justice either. But the implication is that there is a dimension of goodness universally, and particularly then with the practice of meditation as we're doing it in the Buddhist context, we are, like I was talking about in the class, it's not just that we're becoming calm, but we're also discovering the reality of goodness. So it's not just that we're living there with the snake and making friends with the snake, but we're actually seeing there was no snake to begin with. There was a rope that we misunderstood or mistook for being a snake, but there is no snake. And that's where the Buddha's meditation is not just about us finding some device with which we will be more peaceful and that could possibly make our life better, unless there really is an understanding that life intrinsically is pure and our being intrinsically is free from any flaw or confusion. Then all it does is really just patching over. And so what we want to do with the Buddha's teaching on and practice of Vipassana is not just calm the mind, but actually awaken to an intrinsic goodness. So this is what we're doing then in Buddhist meditation, and we, like my friends say, gosh, that sounds so boring to just sit and do nothing. Then that's why there is a fair bit of emphasis on the value of understanding exactly what it is we're doing, why we're doing it, why there is why there is delusion, why this delusion needs to be removed, and so forth. So there's a pretty, you could say, serious science in the sense of truly understanding what's going on here. But then it needs to be applied. We can't just sit there with our theories and be terribly sort of on top of that. It has to actually be applied in experience. So that's why but at the same time also the experience, if we sort of, how do you say, hijack or appropriate, if we appropriate meditation for being something that's just going to make us feel good, and the actual core of suffering really hasn't been in any way tampered with or even looked at, then all it will do is just being a sort of a temporary device for eliminating some discomfort. So that's why these two aspects, they constitute a very practical dimension of the need for, you could say, calm, presence, and so forth. That's shamatha, calm abiding, mindfulness. But then it comes with this incredible vision and this goodness that is the Buddha's enlightenment. And that is something that's not exactly part of our heritage, our cultural heritage in the Western context. There's no notion of actually the elimination of confusion, duality as falling away in the human or in the sort of sentient disposition. And that's why it's a vastly different and vastly, incredibly radical perspective. And we don't have really Buddhism unless we actually include the understanding that that is the premise. It has nothing to do with cultural beliefs. It has nothing to do with any kind of ordinary structures that we sometimes like to, when we come across foreign cultures that we don't really understand, we kind of like to try to fit them into familiar structures, right? Oh yeah, oh yeah, that is why one does that, you know. So, but with that in place, then again, back to the mountain meadow here. This is really about us just connecting with a fundamental goodness. That, of course, also is where it's so helpful to have, you could say, persons like the Dalai Lama, like the sage, that actually simplifies it down to something that is very visceral and very real, and actually very uncomplicated in the sense that this we can perceive, we can see goodness there, we can recognize it, and we can cultivate that from within. These qualities, they're not difficult, they're not, you know, the idea of generosity or patience and so forth, they're not exactly painful exercises. While there's a bit of theory that is serious, that sells these ideas from the point of view of seeing where we head when where we're going without them, then the actual practice of generosity, there's nothing not to like about it. The actual practice of beginning to connect with reality, there's absolutely nothing not to like about it. So, so we have, through the lineage of the various masters down through the ages, and also through our own openness and, you could say, perception of goodness in ourselves and also in other people, we have a vision of this enlightened disposition, this unclouded disposition, in varying degrees, obviously. So the practice of meditation then, in and of itself, well, yes, it does consist of this indispensable quality of sitting. Of course, meditation ultimately is not about sitting, but sitting does help. It does help us to begin to gain a trust in our own basic goodness, and also begin to have less, be less caught up in the sort of echo chamber of our own projections, and we actually get out of that, come out of that. So it's a lot about us, again, mountain meadow here, it's about us sitting in the meadow and actually looking up and saying, wow, this is an incredible place. Life is an incredible place. So meditation is never about retreating from life. It's actually beginning to open up and seeing and rejoicing and taking in the view. So, so that's where the quality of shamatha is very helpful. It enables us to sit down on the ground and actually not be buzzing about, and to actually begin to, you know, smell the flowers and begin to see the blue sky and the vastness in our reality. That is then vipassana. So yes, the first aspect then is the sitting, and there's various ways to sit, but we in our culture mostly we sit on chairs. I would say if you're under 30, I would say get rid of all your chairs, get them out. Because you're gonna arrive when you come to my age, then you're gonna be all of a sudden, you know, it's gonna be increasingly difficult to well, you know, you could, you know, hopefully, but you'll be fine. But I would also say it makes it a little bit easier when you're comfortable with sitting, you know, on the floor and so forth. If you're not used to sitting on the floor, then yes, well, then we sit on chairs, and that's absolutely fine. And the main point really is that the main point is that the spine can sit straight. We look at the Buddha, we look at the sages, we can see there is some elegance, there's some presence, there's some authenticity in terms of, let's say, properly inhabiting the human body. And that's where the main thing really is that the spine is straight. By the way, you have the Buddha Maitreya, he sits on a chair. So it's not as if there's not sages that don't sit on chairs. But sitting with poise, sitting with dignity, and particularly the aspect, what gives that is that the spine is straight. We also would say take the shoulders a little bit back. And when we're meditating, we don't sort of slouch and forward or go down or anything. We actually sit very present, good head and shoulders, where we sit straight, but then again, the chin is a little bit in. And so there's a little bit sort of presence. We're not sort of spacing out. There's a little bit of poise and posture there. And then, yes, famously, mind at rest. That's the gesture with the hands on the knees, or if you like, mind in equanimity, the hands in the lap, however suits. And then, so that's the posture. When we then sit, what we normally do is think, where is my iPhone, or where is my phone? Where is there a place I can distract myself? Where's something I can read? Somebody I can talk to? What shall I do? I have ennui. I'm having a moment of boredom. I'm not supposed to be. It's like kids nowadays, like, Dad, I'm bored. Dad is supposed to sort of, so we'll make sure you'll be entertained now. So we all are like that, and that's where the mind is itching for an object. And actually, with meditation, we provide that object. We provide it with the breath. So we naturally have a mind that is going for something, but where ordinarily we're sort of happy once we get to the sort of the dummy of our phone or our device or some kind of entertainment. Then we have that dummy and we're kind of like, I good, I exist. You know, I'm having my dummy, therefore I am. And that's where we actually are developing a little bit of autonomy here. And also a little bit of a, you could say, dignified existence, in the sense that we could very well exist without being entertained. And so that's where the value of being able to just sit and just be present with what is very helpful. But the mind looking for something is then accommodated in mindfulness, where we then give it an object, and that is then the breath. So we're following the breath as it exits from our nostrils. And then again, we also let go of even that reference point, and then we just relax, and we don't particularly have any reference when we don't particularly focus as the mind we breathe in. And again, then we focus on the out breath as it exits from our nostrils and then fuses with space. So that's where our attention is. And it's very simple, but it's also radical, because that's the place where we're not tagging along with the ordinary storylines, the ordinary narratives. And that is where mindfulness is special, because it enables us to actually depart or disengage or dislodge or free ourselves from the ordinary, you could say, grip that our psychological narratives, storylines, ruminations, and so forth have on us. And that's where we go to something very simple. And of course, you could say the mind might be a bit miffed, insulted. This is not, you know, this doesn't accommodate my incredibly sophisticated, intelligent story about myself. And so why should I meditate when I can sit and have endless thoughts about myself and my sort of insights about myself? We're very addicted to sort of our self-psychologizing. And we with meditation, we're not doing that. But at the same time, it's curious, because we actually do like to also get out of those storylines. You know, it's what we actually aim at when we go on vacation. It's what we supposedly like when we come down to the ocean, and we sort of, the ocean breeze, the vastness of the ocean. There's sort of this great place in which we're no longer sort of held up in the enclosure of whatever it is that we ordinarily are caught up in, and there's sort of like relief. So that's where it's not as if this freedom from thoughts is something that's counterintuitive or not familiar with us, but it's something that when we're meditating, we discover that we have it with us all the time. We have the option to not be entangled in thinking. And so the more we can tap into that, the more we tap into autonomy and the, let's say, freedom from the ordinary tyranny and controlling that actually takes place on the basis of our fascination with our thinking. So it's never a question of us stopping thinking, but it's more that we just shift the focus to the breath. And that's where the breath, simple as it might sound, and as much as we'd rather go into some cosmic zone that we remember we once had, you know, it was that full moon and we had ingested some interesting substances and there was that great space, you know, and if only I could go back to that place. And that's again very sort of impoverished, really. So the wealth of this approach, the autonomy of it, lies in us, regardless of what's happening within our mind. We could actually just be here and be fully present. That is what the method then of coming back to the breath facilitates, the discovery of this autonomy within the present moment. So the two aspects of shamatha, they are then the aspect of the physical and particularly then the aspect of the mindfulness that comes back to non-distraction on the basis of the breath as a reference point. But as we're sitting, then thoughts come up. That's where if we've had some exposure to what we were looking at before in class, a little bit in understanding of dependent arising, shunyata, and so on, then there's a suspicion that all these realities that we subscribe to, they might not really have that reality that you could say, gullibly attribute to them. And that's where we could have thoughts that arise, and in general, you could say there's this practice of thoughts arise. We don't necessarily tag on to them, and there's a bit of, you'd say, emerging into the world because we're sort of letting go of our self-absorption. There's sort of an enhanced presence of being present. And also there is this increased understanding then that the ways that we trip ourselves up by thinking over all of these thoughts and all the realities we're thinking about, they're so real, so serious, it's so real, might not be that real. And we don't do this on some sort of moralistic ground where we think, I shouldn't be so caught up, or I should be malite, or whatever. It's not a moralistic thing, it's not a judgment thing, but it's us actually having seen that these realities actually don't really, there is no basis for the reality that we attribute to it. So that's where you say if we're informed by the vipassana that comes from analysis, it's quite helpful. If not, even just leaving the mind without the ordinary entanglement of our conceptual constructs, it actually enables us to emerge into being increasingly more present. And so they're already there. There's a natural, you'd say, wider perspective that takes place. There's a natural increased participation with the world around us, with the others around us, and so forth. So we are naturally, when we practice meditation, through simply not being distracted and actually being here, there's an enhanced degree in which we begin to connect with reality, connect with a more open dimension. So that's what we'd like to do with meditation. And again, you know, that's where you might think, oh, there's a lot of words, you know, there's a lot of things to be critical of and so forth. You know, in a way, it's very simple if you, I mean, I guess I'm just somewhat conditioned by a lifetime of being around people that I could see really had some genuine insight, you know, gurus and so on, you know. It's not easy. I mean, I live in a place where I gather there's a lot of not always equally reliable spiritual guides around, you know. Luckily, I don't bump into them a whole lot, but I think they're out there, and sometimes it very often results in a lot of disillusion, a lot of, you could say, frustration and sadness, really. But having had the fortune of meeting a lot of genuine people, then in a way it's not that difficult to really understand what this is about, because it's really more about just tapping into a goodness that's innate. So that's where when we meditate here, what the closest I can get to this is offer a very beautiful short practice by my guru's guru, someone called Jamgön Kongtrul, who wrote a piece on the Buddha. And it's a very devotional piece. And of course, some people might be put off, you know, despite it, we're all into mushy love. And for some people, you know, sort of the quality of bhakti is a little bit sort of a bit too much, you know, for the sort of sanitized person. But again, we are naturally disposed to appreciation. And of course, the language here in the Buddha ritual, or what do we call this Buddha practice that we're doing, it's very deeply appreciative, but it's appreciative for a reason. And so there is, for those who have been around sages, and in general, I think a lot of us appreciate really the goodness of what the Buddha is teaching. It is no exaggeration when we sort of have the sort of praises that we have in the liturgy. And in a way, that is what prefaces the practice of meditation. It takes it out of just being a pretty pedestrian, ordinary project of just, I want to be mindful, and sort of, it takes it into a realm of something really deeply profound and extraordinary. So in my lineage, where I come from, my mom, my teachers and so on, would always, before any kind of meditation practice, preface practice with something that invoked something great, something extraordinary, that sort of reflected the qualities of enlightenment, both in terms of the compassion, in terms of the strength, in terms of the wisdom. So the Buddha practice that we proceed meditation with sort of brings that atmosphere in. And then when we do the meditation, then you could say after that invoking the Buddha, then there's also the dissolving the reference of the Buddha as external and simply just settling with a place in which we mingle with the wisdom of the Buddha, and settling into that. Then the Buddha is no longer seen as just an external phenomenon, but very much as the quality. The external manifestation is really just there to empower and enable us to connect with a dimension that is innately ours. And so that's why we then sit. And then we sit for 35 minutes. So we sit for 35 minutes. That's where we sit 15 minutes, and then we do 5 minutes of mindful walking, and then again we sit for 15 minutes again. So that's the plan. That's what we're doing here. Okay. So again, 2 minutes break, and then we'll begin. Thank you very much. Someone's commented that they spat the dummy several times this week. Okay. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. May all sentient beings enjoy happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the sacred happiness devoid of suffering. And may they dwell in boundless equanimity that is free from attachment and aversion. As the union of unborn emptiness and the ceaseless appearances of interdependence, magically there appears before me in the sky, amidst vast clouds of offerings, on a jewel-lined throne and lotus sun and moon disk seats, the incomparable teacher, Lion of the Chakras. His body the color of gold, adorned with major and minor marks. Clad in the 3 Dharma robes, he sits in Vajra posture. His right hand gracefully poised in the earth-touching mudra, and his left hand in the gesture of meditation, holding an alms bowl full of nectar. Like a mountain of gold, magnificent he shines in splendor, spreading beams of wisdom light across the whole expanse of space. The 8 closed suns, 16 elders and the like, a vast ocean-like retinue of noble beings encircles him all around. Simply think of him and he grants the glory of the highest bliss, liberation from samsara and nirvana, the 2 extremes. With your great compassion, you embraced this turbulent and degenerate world and made 500 mighty aspirations. You are as exalted as the white lotus. Whoever hears your name shall never return to samsara. Most compassionate teacher, to you I pay homage. All my own and others' virtues of body, speech, and mind, together with our possessions, visualized like Samantabhadra's offering cards, I offer to you. All the harmful actions and transgressions I have committed throughout beginningless time, each and every one I now confess with intense and heartfelt regret. In all virtuous actions of noble ones and ordinary beings, accumulated throughout the past, present, and future, I rejoice. Turn the wheel of the profound and vast Dharma teaching ceaselessly and in every direction, I pray. Your wisdom body is like space and remains changeless throughout past, present, and future. Yet in the perception of those to be guided, you go through the display of birth and death. Even so, let your form body continue always to appear. Through all the virtues I have accumulated in the past, I'm accumulating now and will accumulate in the future. For the sake of benefiting all beings who are as infinite as space, may you, the sovereign of Dharma, be forever pleased, and may all attain the state of the victorious one, the Lord of Dharma. Living beings like us, adrift in this degenerate age, have no guidance nor protection. Because of your kindness, caring for us with surpassing compassion, every manifestation in this world now of the 3 jewels is your enlightened activity. You are then our only refuge, incomparable, supreme. So from our hearts we pray with total confidence and faith. Do not neglect the great promises you made in times gone by, but hold us until we attain enlightenment with your compassion. Supreme Teacher Bhagavan Tathagata Arhat, complete and perfect Buddha, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni Buddha, to you I pay homage, to you I make offerings, to you I take refuge. Supreme Teacher Bhagavan Tathagata Arhat, complete and perfect Buddha, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni Buddha, to you I pay homage, to you I make offerings, to you I take refuge. Supreme Teacher Bhagavan Tathagata Arhat, complete and perfect Buddha, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni Buddha, to you I pay homage, to you I make offerings, in you I take refuge. Yadao Muni Muni Mahamunaya Soha. 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 Om 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 Muni Muni Mahamunaya Soha. From the Buddha's body there emanates a great radiance, a multicolored rays of wisdom light, dispelling all our own and others' obscurations and causing all the genuine qualities of the Mahayana path to arise within us, so that we attain the level of perfection from which we will never return again to samsara. The miraculous display of the unsurpassable wisdom appears as the intentions, deeds, prayers, knowledge, love, and ability of all the Sugatas and their children. May all beings become exactly like them. I prostrate to all the Buddhas and to the Bodhisattvas endowed with the divine eye of the sages, and to the Shravakas as well. I prostrate to Bodhicitta, which counteracts birth in all lower realms, perfectly shows the path to the higher realms, and leads to no aging nor death. Whatever negative actions I have done under the influence of an afflicted mind, in the presence of the Buddhas, I fully acknowledge them all. By the accumulation of any merit I have created through the three kinds of activities, may my seed of omniscience grow, and may I attain awakening that never ends. Whatever offerings to the Buddhas that can be found in realms of the 10 directions are known to the Buddhas who rejoice in them. I rejoice in all these offerings. I fully acknowledge all negative actions and rejoice in all merit. I prostrate to all the Buddhas. May I attain supreme primordial wisdom. I earnestly request the Bodhisattvas who reside on the 10 levels in all the direction of the world in the 10 directions to awaken into supreme enlightenment. Once you have awakened into genuine enlightenment and tamed the Maras and their hordes, may you turn the wheel of Dharma so that all living beings may be healed. With the sound of the great Dharma drum, may you free all sentient beings who are suffering. Throughout inconceivable millions of kalpas, may you remain and teach the Dharma. Mired in the swamp of desire, entangled in the strands of cyclic existence, I am fettered by all that binds. I supplicate those, supreme among humans, to look upon me. The Buddhas do not blame sentient beings who are flawed. With a loving heart for all sentient beings, may the Buddhas free them from the ocean of cyclic existence. Any perfect Buddhas who are present, those who have passed away, and those yet to come, may I train following in their way and engage in enlightened conduct. Having perfected the 6 paramitas, may I liberate the 6 families of sentient beings. Having actualized the 6 extraordinary faculties, may I reach unexcelled enlightenment. Future phenomena are not born, and those past will not occur. Present phenomena have no inherent nature. There is no actual location. There is no perception. There are no outer things. May I realize Dhammadhatu of emptiness. According to the Buddhas, the great sages, there are no truly existent sentient beings, no life force. There is no truly existent individual and no nurturing of a self. May I realize the Dhammatā where the self is not present. An entity such as grasping onto a self in mind is not present within any of the paramitas. To benefit all sentient beings, may I give with generosity free of avarice. Sisters entities, may my wealth appear spontaneously. Since all things totally disintegrate, may I perfect the paramita of generosity. Endowed with a flawless ethics that is guided by rules, and an ethics that is completely pure. With an ethics free of an arrogant mind, may I perfect the paramita of ethics. Just as the elements of earth, water, fire, and wind, bodhisattvas do not remain caught by mental constructs. By attaining patience, anger never arises. May I perfect the paramita of patience. Through the power of previous perseverance, having become stable, enthusiastic, and free of laziness, and through a strong body and mind, may I perfect the paramita of perseverance. Through the samadhi where all is illusion-like, through the samadhi of the hero's stride, and through the samadhi that is like a vajra, may I perfect the paramita of meditative concentration. Through actualizing the 3 gates of full liberation, the equal nature of the 3 times, and the 3 types of knowing as well, may I perfect the paramita of prajna. Through persevering in a bodhisattva's practice, may I attain the kaya praised by all the Buddhas, the luminous kaya and the kaya blazing with majesty. Thus may my intention be fulfilled. May I be like the famed Maitreya, who engaged in such a practice, perfected the paramitas, and perfectly abides at the zenith of the 10th level. By this merit, may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may all beings be free. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish ever more and more. May the Buddha appear in this world. May the light of the teaching shine like the sun. May the holders of the teaching live in harmony, and thus may all be auspicious for the teaching to endure. We pray for the good health of the teachers. We pray for their precious lives to be long. We pray for their activities to spread and increase. May we be blessed and never depart from the teachings. Akashasya stitiyavat Yavacha Jagataha Stiti Abam Mama Siti Bhuyaha Jagadukani Nignata Akashasya Stiti Avat Yavacha Jagataha Stiti Abam Mama Siti Bhuyaha Jagadukani Nignata.
Tavan mamastiti bhuyahat jagaduka ninignata. Tavan mamastiti bhuyahat jagaduka ninignata. As long as space remains, as long as the world remains, may I too remain to alleviate the sufferings of the world. Thank you. Thank you.